what if the end goal actually is to kill sex? Deaden us to it to such an extent, make it so ubiquitous around us that we become completely numb to it. Because I mean, think about it. I said this is really the enemy here. The enemy in the culture war is standards, right?
I woke up tired of the chain, same old loop, same old shame. Pocket full of promises that never paid my rent. I done lost too many days, chasing smoke and empty haze. Now I want a life that fits, a life I won't present. I can feel it in my bones, I don't need that old control. One step and another step, watch me take it back home. Keep fighting the good fight, break free, stay free, be free. Keep fighting the good fight, break free, stay free, be free. I want a life I don't escape, I want a home inside my name. Keep fighting the good fight, break free, stay free, be free.
We are live here. All right, cool. So everybody, welcome to the Porn-Free Millennial Podcast. And we are in for a treat today. We have Dr. Gregory Borse, this is his seventh time on the Porn-Free Millennial Podcast. So he takes the crown for being the most asked for guest, I'd say. And man, the last time that Dr. Borse and I did a podcast, it was episode 52, where I actually was driving through Arkansas in my RV on the way back home to Colorado from Florida. And I was talking to Dr. Borse, and we are doing this thing that we're starting. It's only 2 years in the making right now, but it's been really fun because every Halloween we're like, hey, let's do like a Halloween special for Porn-Free Millennial. Like, let's talk about, and I'll talk about Dr. Borse and his background in a second, why there's context there. But we started it. It was episode, episode 28, Porn is a Vampire. That was our first Halloween special that we did with Dr. Borst and your friend Kale Zeldin, who also has the Substack, The Underneath. Super smart guy. And that's that's been the most downloaded episode of Porn-Free Millennial.
Really?
And like that one's great. And we basically talked about the mythology of the vampire, right? Tying that into porn. And I just love talking with Dr. Borse because you've got such a great background with culture, with English specifically, right? So just giving a little bit of a background, Dr. Borse. So he got his bachelor's and master's from the University of Dallas. And then he has his PhD from the University of LSU in Baton Rouge, and that's in English. And then you're in your office right now, but in an office that I actually was in last summer when I visited you and your wife at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. I was just saying for episode 52, that was our second Halloween special, and we did the movie Psycho, which we'll probably talk about it as we're going through today's conversation. But I mean, you're like the encyclopedia, I think, of like everything Hitchcock.
Well,
and
I don't know about that, but he's been one of my favorites for the longest time. And I do teach film here at the University of Arkansas, so I've had occasion to deep dive. And I did have a chapter of a book. I was asked to provide a chapter of a book, ironically for me, called Marx Goes to the Movies, where they were looking for Marxist, readings. And they asked me at this conference, they said, we really liked your presentation. Would you like to provide a chapter? And I said, sure. Is anybody writing on Psycho? And they said, no. Could you do a Marxist reading? I'm like, I could do one. I did the most subversive chapter in the world. But it ended up being about Psycho and the grifters. But so I do have, I've dipped my toe in different different disciplinary areas. I teach everything in literature from ancient Greek literature to modern, novel. I'm teaching a Hawthorne Melville James graduate level course right now. But I can teach Chaucer. I can read them in Middle English. But I also teach film, sometimes history and development of film, but normally I'm teaching undergraduates just like the introductory course, film appreciation, which is a fun course to teach. And then I also teach all the philosophy courses here, except for one. So, you know, keeps me nimble.
Keeps you nimble. I love
Yeah.
it. And we're gonna be so just a little bit of a plug. So we Dr. Borse and I, our first podcast is episode 14 of the Porn Free Millennial podcast. And that's one that we're going to do like a little bit of a refresher on it. Definitely recommend listening to it because that one is about the evolution of porn in culture and technology. And sometimes, when I'm thinking about these concepts in my mind, I'm like, if I just did it on my own, I think I'd do an okay job of it, right? But then
Yeah.
I brought this to Dr. Borst. I was like, hey, can we just talk about like how pornography like evolved? And when we have this conversation, and I'm going to put the link in the chat, I'll put it in the show notes too for people listening to this after. But I mean, you started to talk about prehistoric times. I think you talked about Mount Vesuvius
Yeah.
and like all of the lewd artwork that was found there.
Yeah.
And then we started talking about Shakespeare, and you did such a good job of like branching throughout the age, like how pornography's evolved. And for today's topic, I mean, this was just something that just has come up in my mind, right? Because for me and like what I focus on, right, with Porn Free Millennial, with the writing and with the podcast is breaking free from porn. And for me, I think somebody that's in like recovery or just someone that maybe isn't in recovery, I think for a lot of us, right, it's such a sensitive thing. Like for me, like I've just felt like over the past 8 years of being in porn recovery, you're just so sensitive to like any kind of nudity or like anything. It just pops up and like you can almost sense like when a movie or a show is going to go into like a nude scene. And for me, like when I watch movies, I mean, we were just talking about a movie recently, like a vampire movie that was a really good movie. There were some scenes in there that I could just see coming, and I just went through them, right? Like I just fast forwarded. I'm like, I'm not even gonna watch it because I'm like, how does this further the plot? And is this gonna trigger me to
And
then?
and by the way, a man after my own heart. That's exactly what my bride does. She is not interested. Like, you know what I mean? So she'll just skip over it. We'll keep watching whatever we're watching, but she does not like that. And I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't, in fact, I watched my Eyes Wide Shut with my son.
With
And
eyes shut at times.
was I got in so much trouble it wasn't even funny. I mean, because it's
Right,
Kubrick and it's about more than what you think it's about, right?
right.
And she was mad at me. And I'm like, all right, not gonna make that mistake again. You know what I mean? And she knows that I've seen it and I've watched it. I don't show it like in my film appreciation class.
Sure.
I deliberately avoid films that have over sexualized content or nudity. And what's weird is that I did not deliberately set out to do that. And then once I made my stack of films that I'm going to show, I was like, wow, you know what I mean? I just naturally did that. I just naturally did it. It was all award winning directors and writers. And I didn't set out to do that. I just wanted to pick films that I like. Um, but I ended up with a group that just doesn't have any gratuitous stuff in it, doesn't need it. Um, and so it's possible to wend your way through this world to try to avoid it. But as you've pointed out, everything seems hypersexualized these days. And I have some ideas about why that is and why it's accelerated so much. Um, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and we'll hop into it. I think part of what we wanted to do to start off with was do like a little bit of a recap of the conversation that we had, just to build up maybe some context behind it. But yeah, that's really the question I was thinking about when I wanted to talk to you about this was it's almost like you have to opt out of it
Yeah.
and you have to be more aware of it today as maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It would be almost like, oh yeah, like that movie, like the Kubrick movie, like just know there's a lot of stuff in there and like people kind of knew it. But now I think like if you're on Netflix or you've got a subscription, a lot of the shows that they're pumping out today, it just seems like that's just baked into the cake with just about like every rated R show. Or when we think about sexualized, it doesn't just have to be nudity or like sex
Right.
scenes.
Right.
I think it's just like advertising. I mean, sometimes I don't really watch a lot of TV. Like I watch, streaming services and stuff. They'll still pop up commercials. But even like watching like a chocolate commercial or something, and like
Yeah.
the voice is sensual, and it's like when I'm going through recovery, right, and I'm more sensitive to it, it's like you just pick up on it a little bit more where you're just like, "Hey, is this gonna make me want like, do I wanna, like, have sex with the chocolate or do I wanna eat it?"
Well, yeah,
And they're
and
kinda like, "Well, maybe both."
right. And notice this, you just mentioned the R rating. You know, the ratings when I was younger than you, they were hard and they were real. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, I cut my teeth watching films in the 80s. Those slasher films all came through and within about a 2-year period. There were like 100 of them. And the old cliche of, getting one person who's of age into the theater and then propping the door open on the fire escape and everybody sneaking behind the curtain and, trying not to get caught. That kind of stuff was going on all the time. But the R rating it was understood, you know what I mean, what it meant. And now look at the way the rating system has been eroded.
Mm,
It's Do you see what I mean? Like something we don't even see the R, the PG, the PG-13, or the G
right.
on streaming. We just have for lack of a better term, a trigger warning for like what's in this. MA, mature audience, get ready for smoking or whatever. Um, and or sex or sexual images or innuendo, or they don't even call it substance abuse anymore. They call it substance use. Uh,
Interesting.
you know what I mean? But this is all it's all part and parcel of an erosion of standards. That is really the enemy. Porn is a symptom. The enemy in our culture wars is standards, and so they're being attacked from all sides in all ways. And it's gotten us to a point in cultural history that is just right now a little bit insane.
Sure.
One of the things I do is there's a news aggregator that I'm happy to plug called Instapundit. And I like it because they just post a bunch of links to the day's stories,
Mm,
but their commentary that go with the links is always kind of hilarious. So you get a good chuckle on their commentary. And then you can just go to the link and it takes you to the source and you can read the story and decide for yourself whether it's a trustworthy source or not, whatever. But today I was scrolling through it earlier and like here we are. A United States congresswoman or senator was in a hearing, was talking about proposing a bill regarding absolute equality between men and women, right? And the question she got asked by another congressperson, and you can guess the parties here, right? Was okay, well, will your bill define what a woman is?
mm,
And she went absolutely gobsmacked silent because you cannot square the two demands, right? The
right.
one demand is there is no difference. I can't tell you what it is. Men should be able to play in women's sports, right? And then, you know, and then that. So I'm like, intellectually, this whole thing has got to collapse at some certain point just for its own absurdity. But that's what the war on standards has brought to us. And I think pornography and the sexualization of children and the sexualization of television in general is part and parcel of that,
Mm.
of that movement of late, the acceleration of that movement. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, and I think that in a way too, right? And maybe we can dive into this, and we're gonna go through like a few of the concepts that we talked about in episode 14. And again, that's the evolution of porn and culture and technology. Give that a listen. It's great. I was re-listening to it just to get ready for this podcast, and It's funny. I was telling Dr. Borse before we got on the call, that was that was about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's funny listening to yourself and be like, wow, like I sound like a spring, like a little baby talking to Dr. Borse. And here we are talking again 3 years later. But that's a great conversation. We won't go through the whole thing. But really, again, it's like start to finish, and then a little bit ahead. I think we start to talk about AI and technology. But we'll do a few kind of concepts, and then we'll dive in. And then feel free if you have some questions too, as we go. He is a professor, right? So he's used to that, and I'm used to him too. But yeah, I think part of what we talked about was mirroring the evolution of porn with the evolution of technology, and how I think you brought up in the podcast about how technology has really been like okay, I'm gonna try to get the word for it, but it's like a advancement of like a part of our body, like an
Yeah.
extension.
So prior to the industrial, all the way up through and until the Industrial Revolution, and I got this from Dr. Donald Cowan, who was one of the founders of the University of Dallas, in a book called Unbinding Prometheus. He made the point, and I thought it was brilliant, that up until the Industrial Revolution, technological advancements are an extension of our musculoskeletal system. So, machines are just stronger versions of ourselves that we would do that ourselves if we could, kind of thing, right? And so they tend to look like what they are. Bulldozers look like dirt pushers. Cranes look like things that pick things up. You know what I mean? But once you pass into I guess people call it the technology age, but the computer age. Now our technological advancements are an extension of our nervous system and our brain. So they're extensions of our eyes, our ears, our noses, even soon at a theater near you, taste, right? And touch. And so this has compounded a certain kind of distortion, I think, that we have that has accelerated the pornographication of culture, if you want to call it that. Because I think it has led to, and body dysmorphia, I think it's led to a general disorientation that younger and younger people are suffering as a result of constantly bilocating. So they're in their bodies, but they're also not in their bodies because they're in their phones.
Right.
And so it's a separation of the nervous system from the musculoskeletal. And obviously the union of the musculoskeletal and the nervous system is sex, as well as eating, hence the chocolate, right? Because both of those systems are heavily, heavily involved in the experience of all that, right? So if we routinely separate the two, right, then I think what happens is the snapback by the individual who has a craving to occupy their own body goes too far in the other direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, when you're living in the virtual world of the extension of your brain and your eyes and your senses outside of your own body, you live in a world where, I was thinking about this the other day, choosing music, watching television, right, is such a huge labor. It's such a time suck just to get to the point where you can actually watch a show.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My kids, that would drive me crazy. I drive a very old-fashioned car. It's not very computerized at all. I don't have a manual transmission. I did until last year, but I have a new car. It's a little four-wheel drive. But like, it's a throwback it's a 2004. You get in, you turn the key, the engine turns on, the radio's already on a station that you like, and you go. And my kids, you get in your car and you turn it on, and then there's a whole process that you have to go through to get everything set up, right?
Yeah.
So that you can make your trip. Like now, when we take trips, if my bride is driving, she'll be like, "All right, I'm gonna go get the car set up," and I've still got 5-6 minutes because I don't need to, you know what I mean? I don't need to go out and just sit in the car and wait for her to get everything set up. So it drives me crazy, but it also illustrates this idea that if you if you go too long without some sort of engagement with your physical self in the time and the place in which your body actually exists, I think it explains a lot of a sort of craving that leads to a kind of perversion that we would not have ordinarily gone to, if that makes sense. Um, and film is an interesting participant in this. You mentioned Hitchcock earlier. Well, that's new territory. So yeah, in the other podcast, we talked about those things. We talked about how, Walter Benjamin wrote a book called Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproducibility and asked the fundamental question, do we even experience it anymore? Because it's
Yeah.
it's duplicatable, and the duplication is identical to the original. And now with not only AI, but auto tuning, which is a precursor to AI, there's a question in my mind about whether anybody on the planet has ever actually heard Madonna's voice or Lady Gaga's or any number of singers that are on the radio now. At the same time, I'm hearing from parents that their kids who are so savvy on social media and smart media can immediately identify what's AI and what's not. And I'm
Mhm.
happy. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just went through a political campaign, and his daughter's my youngest daughter's age. She's college age, and or no, his son is high school. And they were at an event where she came out with a statement. The opponent did, right? And his kid just leaned over and said all of that was AI.
Right, right,
And he
right.
said, and by the way, the Facebook post that this person does is AI as well. I was like, that's really interesting because on the radio the other day, I heard that this guy's daughters could always tell when music has been tweaked or written by AI. They can always tell. So there's something that AI is missing about the humanly produced that I think is pretty identifiable. We get a feel for it. Um, so we're not totally disoriented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the other thing we talked about in that first podcast too, because when you came to me with the idea, I was like, well, porn's not really my thing. I was like, but on the other hand, what if we talk about standards for beauty? Because I have studied that a lot. And when you start thinking about the way our aesthetic sense, especially about body beauty, has changed for women, whereas
Right.
if you think about for men, it hasn't changed since ancient Greek times, right? The standard is lean, athletic, right? Strong. But for women, it's gone in and out of these phases, right? Um, but what you notice in art, when you study art, is that there's something in the ancient tribal world that understands that there's something about the female form that is there's a divine mandate that it remain hidden. And I put it in these terms. Men's reproductive organs are on the outside of their body, so nobody thinks twice about depicting them because there's nothing beautiful about them at all. They're completely functionary, right? Um, Men are built to apparently to spread their seed. But there's something that was divinely ordained in the fashioning of woman that the gods mandated that those functions remain hidden,
Mm.
right? They remain hidden. And you can see it in art for thousands of years that we are shy about depicting the female nude, right? We're shy about it. And she gets covered. Where men, no, it's not even a thing. And so, in ancient pornography, like at Pompeii, the depictions, by the way, which are cartoonish and completely outlandish, are mainly of men. The
Mm.
concentration is on the male nude. Do you see what I mean? There might be women, I saw it. I was there at Pompeii. We toured the room with the walls, and we were like, oh my God, everybody giggling and stuff like that. Um, but what was funny about it was that it wasn't advertising. It was almost like caricatures of outrageous sexuality, right? Um, so you could almost feel that it wasn't even serious. You know what I mean? Like it might have been in a house of ill repute, but it was also comic relief because none of it was really real. Um, so it takes a long time for us to get to the form, you know, of pornography. It takes a long time for us to get to the form, you know, of sexuality. And I think of pornography that we're familiar with, which starts to reveal those parts, especially of the female body, which are forever supposed to be off limits. So yeah, breasts, you see breasts in the ancient world, but usually maybe just one, maybe, you know what I mean? Partially uncovered, rarely full nudes, rarely anything below the waist that's not, obscured in some way. Until we get to, 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. And pornography originally, as I pointed out in the first podcast, is written, right? It's graphy. It's not just for graphics, it's for the fact that it's, you know what I mean? So the smut, that's why the novel didn't take off as a form, it was a popular form, but it was an underground form, right? And it was seen by elite society as the kind of art it wasn't even art, it's pulp, right?
Oh.
And that fits with the world that we're in, because we're, in that world, in Western civilization, sex becomes something that is not talked about, but it's clearly, you know what I mean? It's clearly going on everywhere. I was thinking about that today, and I may have mentioned it in the first podcast where, whole manors on the French countryside were constructed, and you could almost say constructed to facilitate assignations that are going on inside the house that people were not supposed to talk about or see. So you have the servants' quarters maybe in the basement, right? But then these manors were designed with walls, like hallways behind walls. Those were the servants' hallways. Servants were to serve and not be heard or seen. But obviously at night, what do you think the lord of the manor is doing? He's slipping in a secret passageway and going down secret stairs inside the walls, right? And the Victorian times, they really reveled in this duality between what was seen and what wasn't seen. And that's another change that we've noticed in our lifetime.
Right.
Is that the thing about pornography, even in the 60s and 70s, is that it was dirty, it was secret, right? It was shameful. Obviously, it was an industry that was making money, right? So plenty of people are going to those smutty magazine places behind, I don't know what the name of that restaurant was, but it was a red triangle building and it sold walnut bowls. Can't remember, but there was always a porn shop behind it. And I think there might be a few left in America, but yeah, or you could buy them at the convenience store, but the covers were covered and you had to be bold, right? To walk up there and say, hand me that.
Right.
Otherwise you got them in the mail in a plain brown bag. And what we've seen during your lifetime and before your lifetime is a complete discarding of all of that. And it's because of this, the internet and the smartphone. It's so available that it feels, as you said, it feels like it's everywhere. And so
Yeah.
I think, with body dysmorphia, this is the rise in this kind of technology. It goes along with the rise of anorexia nervosa in the 80s and the 90s again. And that ties into the aesthetics of the female body. You remember Twiggy, this extra skinny model, was introduced as a standard in the 70s. And then we blinked an eye and all of a sudden, female models looked like hangers. Just,
Right.
you know what I mean? The body went away, it emaciated itself, and it became all about the clothes. Then there was a resurgence in the 90s of a more ample or fecund look, and now it's become, I'm noticing in fashion, it seems more reasonable. You know what I mean? Just like, not super skinny necessarily, all different kinds of body types. That movement I think is pretty good. But again, it's interesting to me that the depictions of the female form end up being those sites where we see it most extremely. Whereas with the male form, it kind of doesn't matter. Still, maybe that's a double standard, but it seems
Yeah.
like
Can you talk a little bit? You talked about this. I really think this is a great point that I think you've made a lot. throughout our podcast, but where the word obscene comes from?
Yeah. So that's a theater term. And in theater, the standard used to be that you never show anything that's taboo on stage. So obscene literally means off stage. Okay. It came to mean obscene the way we mean it, which means dirty and nasty. But sexual union between men and women is sacred. The gods have always looked at it that way. Judeo-Christian world looks at it that way. In the Catholic world, and in many Christian sects, sex is reserved for the married state, and it is a union between a man and a woman that does not happen publicly. It is necessary for that state, and so in up through Shakespeare's time, like marriages, you never see a sacrament. You'll never see a character in a Shakespeare play go to confession. You might see him enter the confessional, but you're not going to see him say a confession and get absolution. You're not going to see anybody take communion. You're not going to see anybody. If you think about Much Ado About Nothing, right? We don't see the wedding. We see the precursor ceremony to the wedding, where the promises that they're going to stay together are kind of made, but they don't marry. The marriage is happening like the following week. And so I found that very interesting, the way it was depicted in the film by Kenneth Branagh, which I highly recommend to everybody. It's a delight. You don't see sacraments are not to be shown on stage. And so that anything that was off stage was obscene. And I wish we would get a sense of that kind of decorum back in our art, because as you might know, or you might agree with me, sometimes the art that doesn't show becomes the much more powerful, much more frightening, much more tantalizing, much more exciting, much more entertaining. And I thought Hitchcock was a master of that.
Yeah.
Many filmmakers are, but a lot of filmmakers have lost the art. And it's funny. I made this joke a few years ago. Like, why is Hollywood so bad? Like I showed the movie Moonstruck to my freshman. And this was within the last 10 years. But I remember one day the film ended, and one of my students, can't remember if it was a girl or a guy. I did have a guy in his journal confess that it was he confessed it. He said, Moonstruck was my favorite film, and it surprised me. You know what I mean? But somebody said at the end of the film, they're like, Dr. Borse, why don't they make movies like this anymore? I was like, I don't know. They're on a suicide mission. Because if you look at Hollywood, and you look at the top grossing films of all time, right? They're not rated R.
Right.
They're all PG or G. Our movies do not make money. And for a while they're on the list of top grossing films. The Exorcist and The Passion of the Christ were the two highest R-rated films, top grossing. And I was like, how ironic it's those two films.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're both extraordinarily serious about the topic that they take on, and they're extraordinarily well-made films. But I say that because it seems as if, Hollywood is a nexus in the culture wars and is willing to take a bath on projects in order to get a message out, even if it knows it's not gonna end up making money back on it. And I don't know how long that business model can sustain itself. And so that's another one of my sayings. You can't fool reality forever. It is going to catch up with you. So just as an aside, for instance, I just read an article today that since 2022, New York City has lost $8 billion in taxes just because the millionaires are leaving. And I'm like, well, you can't fool reality forever. It's like Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is you always end up running out of other people's money. And, that's what's happening in New York. You know what I mean? It's happening everywhere. People are just voting with their feet and saying, "No, I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to go to Tennessee. I'm going to Texas." And I think that will happen because, Hollywood can't sustain itself if it's not actually making a profit.
Right.
And so I think we will see a natural swing away from the sexualization of everything, because audiences just dry up. They don't, you know. I just learned they're doing a new version of Little House on the Prairie, and it's going to be totally woke. And I'm just like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Why does Hollywood have to do this?
Yeah, because I don't know, and maybe just like thinking about the topic itself, like it seems almost like these scenes are just the focus on the sex. I have a question that we can chew on a little bit, but like what does it do to actually move like the plot forward? You
Right.
know, one of the movies I really like, I love and I haven't seen the new one that came out yet, but the Count of Monte Cristo movie,
Mhm.
uh, with Jim Caviezel in it
Yeah.
and Guy Pearce. I just love that movie. I just love it. Just have a special place in my heart. But there's a beautiful woman like that's Jim Caviezel's like wife, and they have romance, but they don't actually show really the romance.
Right.
It's just like a quick, like they're getting in bed together, they have like a kiss, and then like the lights go out or something.
Yeah, and
And
you
for
think of
me, yeah,
yeah, go ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
the same for me. Like when I was watching the movie, I didn't really need anything more than that.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't anything that was like, man, I wish they would have shown more of that. It is almost like the message was given that they're in love and that they're making love. And for me, I just thought, okay, well, it's fine. Like the way that the scene was shown, for me, it gave me the point. I understood what was going on in the story. But I find that with the common stuff that's being put out, like mass produced, like all these shows on Netflix or Amazon or whatever, you can just tell almost just from like if you just looked at a trailer for the show
Yeah.
that there's just gonna be sex everywhere. And it just makes, and then I automatically think, well, is this even gonna be like that good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is this mainly just, is that just like a hook to get you in? Because that's at least my idea, at least, or my theory behind like why everything's so sexualized is because with our attention spans these days, because of our smartphones, because of social media, because we're on this constant feed. I think that's the reason why they call it a social media feed, right?
Yeah.
You're just being fed things. You have to get somebody's attention right away. And I think like what's like one of the best ways to get someone's attention, right, is somebody attractive, sex. Like, the term sex sells.
Yeah.
They say it for a reason, but it just seems like because for some reason, right, there's no new ideas in the world. That's seems like that's the gimmick to get people clicking and people watching is like, oh, I might see something here,
Well,
right?
what if it goes beyond that? What if the end goal actually is to kill sex? Deaden us to it to such an extent, make it so ubiquitous around us that we become completely numb to it. Because I mean, think about it. I said this is really the enemy here. The enemy in the culture war is standards, right? And what is the standard of standards? I mean, thank God for Christopher Nolan. We are just about to, be offered up his version of the Odyssey. I can't wait.
Yeah,
Right?
me too.
I
I'm
can't.
excited.
But we've talked about this before. The Iliad is about the death of the warrior culture, and it is almost like a dirge, it's sad, right? Homer is lamenting the death of a once extraordinarily noble culture, right? But think about what the Iliad did. It tore every single husband warrior away from his bride and put him at the service of another woman, right? And interestingly, Odysseus, while he does participate, sometimes rather reluctantly, in that concubine culture of the warrior away from home, it's simply expected, right? That men have their needs. And one of these needs, like in the Epic of Gilgamesh, when Enkidu shows up as the wild man, the way he is tamed is the harlot. You know, the religious prostitute goes out into the woods and seduces him, and it civilizes it, right? And when Enkidu and Gilgamesh get into their massive brawl that makes them the best of friends in the world in the poem, it's because Enkidu deigns to trip Gilgamesh as he is about to take another man's wife. So what's being defended here? What is the heart and soul of civilization? It's marriage. And what is under attack now? Marriage, right? And I'm not even going to say the nuclear family. That goes along with it. If you can ruin marriage, you can ruin the nuclear family as a standard, right? So in the Odyssey, when you guys all watch the Odyssey, and I'm sure most of your audience is keen to see it, know that the lesson that Odysseus must learn is that he got his priorities and his roles out of order. He thought of himself as a warrior king first, a husband second, and a father third. And really what he is he's a husband first and a father and then a king. And so it's almost as if the whole journey is the God saying, we love this man so much. How can we get him back to where he understands who he is in terms of what his roles and his promises are? And the poem ends with him finally rejoining Penelope in their nuptial chamber in a bed that is fashioned in the bowl of a living olive tree. I mean, that is at the top of the citadel reaching into the sky as a connection between the divine and the mortal orders. I mean, it's stunningly good, right? So to me, it's clear that Homer is talking about the fact that while marriage obviously was central to the tribal order, it had to be reestablished in the civilizational order, and that's what the Odyssey is about. It's about going away from one, order for society and transitioning to a new paradigm. And so what has been, how important is marriage to the political, social, and cultural order of the West from Homer until the French Revolution, right? And then when we get into what you and I might call modern times, after the Age of Reason and after the French Revolution and the American Revolution, what comes under attack consistently? And this is when porn, right? The invention of the photograph, the camera, the motion camera, and then there is a concurrent attack against marriage as the standard at the heart of what the Greeks would have called the oikos, the rule of the household, which is the foundation for the rule of the city, which is the foundation for the role of man in nature as the steward of something that was divinely created, right? And that's the same for pagan religion as it is for the Judeo-Christian myth as well. They both have that sensibility about what man's really unique and special role is. And I love the way the Greeks always have the gods sort of falling in love with human beings, because we really do occupy a unique spot. We're not angels, we're not gods, but we're not animals either, right? We're, and as I point out to people, they always forget to quote the second part. In Genesis it says God, man and woman, he made them, right? Which actually implies that men and women are equal. And two, it says that we were made in his likeness and in his image. Right. So what's being attacked in pornography? Well, it's both, right? Because minerals, vegetables, and animals are all made in God's image, but not in his likeness. Right? Angels are made only in his likeness, but not in his image, because they don't have bodies. Images are incarnate. So we occupy a unique space. Can you see why we would be the crux of all battles, spiritual and otherwise? It makes total sense to me. So it seems to me that, pornography as one that is not just a body attacking thing, it's a soul attacking thing. Right.
Yeah.
I think I've said this quote from C.S. Lewis before. Bless the body. I've gotten mine has gotten me into many scrapes, but I've gotten mine into far more. Because we get our bodies into trouble because we make choices. We direct them. They may alert us to a desire for a good, right? But we still have to direct them. And so, and Aquinas would have said, we think of the soul body nexus backwards. He said we really should be thinking about a body inside a soul, not a soul in a body. And I was like, he didn't say it in those words, but I read that in an introduction to Aquinas, and I was like, that's brilliant, right? We are souls, we are bodies inside souls. And what is our salvation going to be accomplished through? I mean, if you're Christian, what is it?
Well, I would say, your faith, your body.
I mean, we both agree that we can't do it, right?
Right.
It has to be accomplished by somebody who doesn't need to be saved. And there's only one of those.
Right.
And that's Jesus. And interestingly enough, it's through the destruction of his body that he redeems all bodies, right?
Yeah, the flesh.
So obviously, and that's the scandal. That's what I've always called the scandal of the body, the scandal of Christianity, the scandal of Christ during his own time and beyond, is the absolute importance of incarnation, of the fact that we are incarnate beings. When we die, we will resurrect. We say that in our creed. I look forward to the resurrection of the dead, right?
And life
So
of the world to come.
We're not going to some spiritual heaven where we don't have bodies. We are going to be embodied creatures in heaven, but perfected, right? So it makes total sense to me that the attack would be against the human, not the goldfish, right? Because how do I defeat the image of God? I can't, right? And the attack would be on humans through the body, at the body to get to the soul, and at the soul to get to the body. And I think that pornography ends up participating in that, especially in the attack on standards. And I really am. That question that I asked you, what if the whole goal is to kill sex, actually just occurred to me while we were talking. And I was like, that would make sense to me too, because it neutralizes the ability of human beings to participate in their own salvation. Right?
Yeah. I mean, gosh. I mean, because that comes up in my life, right? I mean, that's part of what I write and talk about was my relationship with porn destroyed my marriage of 5 years. Right? Like my relationship with it. I'm not, I'm taking full responsibility, right?
Right.
But why this conversation came up too, right, in my head was so much comes downstream from culture, right, of what we're watching, what we're consuming. I'll just say as an example, right, I was born in the 90s. I mean, I remember just finding so much out of movies, out of shows that was like sexual that I'd hang on to when I was a young kid. Like that, it was like I'd watch a movie and if there was a scene, like I would go back to it. I'd put that DVD in, I'd fast forward to that one scene, and that's like how I would use it, right, as an object for my pleasure. Or when you think about music too, I really loved listening to that rap at the time in high school. I might have had my hat flipped like this. I wasn't a basketball player. I was a baller. You understand? But when you look back at that music, especially how it talked about women, especially black women as well, right? The rap music. I mean, you look back at those lyrics and they're like hanging this stuff, just how they're talking about women and talking about them being hoes. It's like the whole pimps and hoes culture was just like such a thing. I'd say like being in the 90s, going to college, I think I graduated in 2013. And that was right around the time that social media started to really kick up, was around that time, I would say, like going into from high school to college for me. Like I graduated high school in 2009. I think the iPhone came around that time, and then Facebook and all that stuff started coming around like right as I was going into college. But when I think about it, it's like a conditioning process to where you're being conditioned to see this, like normalize this stuff, and then bring it to the marriage. Right? I had this relationship with porn that was just so normalized in my life to where I didn't realize what it was doing to my relationship with Jesus, what it was doing to my relationship, like my intimacy, emotional, sexual, all that stuff, like how it was affecting my intimacy with my ex-wife, right? And it's interesting, right? Because I think a lot of people will just say, it's harmless, whatever. And I just say, no, I don't think it is, and especially I
I
think when you're introduced to it at such a young age, when
well,
you're
and
10.
I lived during a much more innocent age where
Yeah.
pornography was not ubiquitous. TV was being sexualized, but it was starkly segregated. Do you see what I mean? Like networks were devoted to, hey, Friday night
Yeah,
or Saturday night.
late night stuff,
Yeah,
or you
late
have
at
to go
night
to a certain
stuff, off
channel.
limits. Kids are in bed. Parents, this is going to be a little bit more edgy or whatever. But I mean, there was like Sunday nights. That was like Disney movie night. The whole family got around the TV and watched whatever Disney was offering that, back when Disney was Disney. I don't know what it is now. Um,
It's Disney
it,
Plus.
it's Disney plus A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Um, but um, but here's the thing. I mean, I really do think you saw it because you're getting inured of it. It's so around you. Everybody treats it as if it's normal. Notice you talk about hip hop culture. Notice the hop, skip, and the jump from, okay, everything that is cool is transgressive. And man, in the 90s, that word transgressive was all over the place in my area of study while I was working on my PhD, right? All over the place. So to transgress. But think about it. If you transgress every standard there is to the point where there are no standards, then transgression itself becomes nothing, right?
Right.
So like there's a period I went through where I'm like, I kind of feel sorry for gays because, and I'm talking about gay men, because it seems to me that part of the enticement of that whole life was that private and secret culture that it operated on its own, that now has been breached because it's been mainstream. And
Sure.
I haven't talked to anybody about it, but like I can't imagine that there aren't gays out there that are just annoyed. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like we had it perfectly fine. We function in society. We all have jobs. We're living in our houses. We like living in our houses, but we
Sure.
really like this aspect of it. I'm not defending it, but you see what I'm saying? Now that everything has been, here's the thing. When something gets mainstream, then whatever its underground meaning, right, is completely hollowed out. It automatically doesn't mean that anymore.
Right.
And so what I'm seeing in all of the alphabet, the transgenderism, the erosion of a biological standard between male and female, right, is that we are the same, where we're clearly and obviously not the same. That is the apotheosis of the transgression of all standards, to the point where we literally now have a sitting Supreme Court justice who could not tell us what the difference was between a man and a woman, because the culture that she belongs to would have punished her had she told the truth.
Mm.
And so do you see why I'm saying that? I'm saying that the enemy is the standard. The enemy is the truth. That's what's being attacked. It's via the means of sexuality. But what do you think the devil wants to destroy? Um, he wants to destroy our ability to actually be fully human, because that is
Mhm.
the thing that he envies the most. Um, I told you about that German movie by Wim Wenders called Wings of Desire, and the angels in that film, they look at us without sympathy, but also with a lot of curiosity, because they do not understand what it means to be incarnate,
Mm.
because they don't have bodies.
Right.
Um, and so they can intuit the truth of a thing directly, like we can't. We have to go around corners. Um, and part of the fun of going around corners is rubbing stuff, and that's sex, right? Um, so, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me that because I don't think this has come out of my mouth in this interview, but sex itself is a supreme good. So it should not surprise us that it is dirtied and sullied and dragged out of sacred spaces into the profane, which is the public square. And we're told this is, and I mean, the culture we belong to, where there's a whole subset, and it's not a big subset, but it's a loud subset of parents that are trying to raise their children without standards, let the kids pick. I'm taking them to, drag queen reading hour at the library, letting them put dollar bills in, I mean, you've seen films of this on the internet. It's like, and I'm thinking, what is it that drives these people?
Mm.
And that's the other danger of social media. You and I've talked about this because I'm an ass on social media, on purpose. This is the real me, folks. But you know, or this is the me behind the me. But my point
Still
is,
a pretty handsome guy, I'd say. That
well,
has
I'm getting a little bit old. But anyway, if people want to fool themselves into thinking that social media is about anything other than vanity, then I don't think they really understand what it is.
yeah.
And so I kind of poke fun at that. Like I poke fun at that all the time, but I poke fun of it through me. Um, and some people can't stand it, and that's fine. It's kind of my goal, and then other people get it. I had somebody the other day, you saw that t-shirt I had on last time we saw each other that said the man, the myth, and the legend. And somebody said something really negative and caustic about me on X because I had it on. Right. And my answer to him was, my kids gave this to me for Father's Day, loser. Like, really? You know what I mean? Like, could you just
Yeah,
and I always get those kinds of comments from people I have never seen before.
right.
I've never heard of, like, who are you? And why are you in my feed? You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
I'm gonna expect that from, I got one friend that's always tearing me down, but I know who he is, and I know why,
Yeah.
I know what he's doing, and it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
so, like, yeah, that's our relationship, and I
Some
expect it.
mark of male bonding right there is you gotta bust
Exactly,
their
right?
balls a little bit.
He's always busting my chops, always. Like, "You're still a pansy." And I'm like, "Yeah."
So I have a question for you. So this is something that I think we can dive into next a little bit. Okay. So this is interesting, right? Because I think about this a lot. And like you're describing a lot of culture, kind of you'd call it maybe culture war stuff, right? That's going on, which I think media does. The media does a great job of putting like lighting or putting lighter fluid on the fire,
Yeah,
where but it brings up an interesting question, right? With modern entertainment, modern movies, what you see on Netflix. Is it reflecting culture or is it creating it? It's probably a little
I
bit of both, but it's kind of interesting,
for
right?
sure.
Because sometimes, like you said, like you turn on Netflix now, and again, like I've got a gay cousin, I've got friends that are gay, all that stuff. It's not to be negative about, like, for me as a person, right, and how I treat people.
Right.
But like when you go on to Netflix, like it's pretty much like every show, like there's that kind of relationship, or there's more out there like that, which again, is it a reflection of the culture, or is it creating it to where there's more impressionable young people that I would say almost are growing up in a world to where there's a lot of nihilism, I would say, right? Because I mean, even as a millennial, right? Like I make a decent amount of money and I'm living in an RV basically. Like right now I'm house sitting, but
Right.
I'm living the new American dream of traveling around, working remotely in an RV, to where when I was married, I had a house, and that was a really hard thing to do. But
Yeah.
let's just say you're in the shoes of like a teenager that's on social media a lot, and they're just looking at things and they're just looking at like, wow, I'm gonna have to make like 200K. That you know this is now kind of worth like 100K. Like when I hit six figures, I was so excited. And
Yeah.
then I like started looking at my paycheck and I was like, oh, okay, well, I thought this would be like nicer. Like I'd
Yeah.
be living in a mansion or something. And that wasn't the case, especially living in Colorado.
Sure.
Maybe
Yeah.
out in Arkansas, I'd maybe have a better chance of, getting a bigger house. But like in
Right.
Colorado, it's like, you gotta at least to get into like a house that you would call like a house, it at least over like 600, probably if you're like in the city.
Yeah, I've been talking to my sons about that because they're in that transitional period. They're married. They just had their first kids. They don't own houses yet, and it's nutty what they would need. I was like, that's such a big decision. I don't own a house. And I long ago abandoned the idea of that homeownership necessarily being a part of the ingredient for being happy. Now, if I could leave my kids an asset behind to help them out, then great. But by the same token, you've been to my place. I've downsized I have 5 kids, but they're all out. We live in a cabin in the woods, and
Yeah, pretty sweet.
it's really sweet. Um, and for those of you who are nearing that, oh my God, what's going to happen now that I got to sit with my wife all alone and the kids aren't in between us anymore? It's awesome. Uh, our marriage is so strong. It's so much stronger. Like we realize, all the strife that we had in our marriage was always about the kids, one way or the other, right? And so now that they're not there, we're chill. But like you sat on the front porch with me. I don't need to make a lot of money to live the kind of life that I do. I live on a lake. I have access to a lake house 24/7 that's got a pool table and a jukebox and a commercial grade kitchen that's not working right now, but
It's where we filmed episode 52.
exactly, with a nice fireplace in there and that little lake. We got our kayak. We got for my bride for Mother's Day this year. The kids bought her a kayak because after you came, she's like, "I want a kayak." So we got a kayak, not the high end type, but the lake that
Sure.
I have is really, really small, but it's great for fishing. We've got a shooting range out there. I'm building a disc golf course. I mean, guys, I mean, and I don't make a lot of money, but I don't need to. And so, and I said that to my son last time they were all down for the 4th of July. And I was like, look around, you know, look at what our priorities were. Our priorities were making sure that you guys got a good solid foundation and a foundation to go off on your own. And this is what I think is important.
Yeah.
And I said, especially when you're religious, when you take the long view, I don't end up getting frustrated about culture you know, and stuff like that because I'm like, look, at the end of the day, when they're trying to trip Jesus up and they ask him, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? And he says, whose face is on that coin? And they say Caesar's, and he says, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. One interpretation is that Caesar's authority over them is legitimate and they should follow Roman rules. But the flip side of that coin, pun intended, is that what Jesus is saying is if that's what he wants, give it to him because it literally means nothing. It means nothing. So if all we crave is earthly this and earthly that, that's all temporary anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great point. Great point.
And
And
so
I think what I was getting at with what I was building really quick was okay. So if you're online all the time, right? And I've been there before too, where you're
yeah,
online, it's like, holy crap, there's like wars going on, like the economy, like, there's inflation, like, I remember like silver went up super high and it was like, oh gosh, it's like silver is breaking records and then silver crashes, like
yeah,
Bitcoin crashes.
yeah,
And I think for like younger people, right? Like we're just like, how do we get ahead? And you made some great points there too, where it's not all about like owning a house or whatever, but also it's like, but yeah, like I would like the ability to actually have like a decent shot at doing that.
yeah,
But where it kind of fits into the theme of it, right, is I think because our phones have become extensions or even maybe they're a part of us, right? They almost feel like another body part at this point. Like
for
you have to have
sure.
your phone. There you go. Everything that you're being fed is in one way telling you like how shitty the world is and how shitty the future is going to be. And then the other side is feeding you with just the most like, I would say it's like down to a science on like things that can hold your attention
Yeah,
and things that can almost, I think, start to shape the way that you view things. And then I kind of think about it in a way where if you're a young kid and you're kind of in this world, you're just like looking for some kind of identity or just something that you're looking forward to in the day. And I think that can come a lot with the entertainment where it can trap you in there to where I mean, you hear like I work in the corporate world. Half the time, people are just like talking about like whatever the most popular show is going
yeah,
on right now or whatever. And for me, I'm like, I don't care. Like I'm out fishing or like hiking or doing
right.
something outside. And I'm not saying that to like denigrate anyone that like watches shows or anything, but you can see kind of in culture to where people are so hooked onto that to where like that's the thing to do. But like what you're being fed, I think a lot of the times, again, like we were talking about, it's very sexualized, almost like you're talking about, to where who you sleep with is like your main identity. And you
Yeah.
could look at maybe Hollywood or culture decades ago to where like someone's identity was more of like, I'm a man of God or I'm a father,
Yeah.
I'm that, versus now it's like, this is who I sleep with. This is like my sexual orientation, or this is like my favorite OnlyFans model, or this is like my favorite e-girl gamer
Yeah.
that's attractive, to where like those things, like those identities, I don't really think take you anywhere. It more kind of consumes you versus like, hey, like I think in movies when I was growing up, still, there was still like some movies where you're like, oh, like I want to be like that guy,
Yeah.
like I want to be like that man. And especially when I started watching, I went on a big like Hitchcock binge after our trip. And one of my favorites is like the North by Northwest was such a great movie. Oh
It
my
is.
gosh. I was
And
like, it's such a good movie, man.
Cary Grant is the reason to this day that I refuse to run in the rain. I just won't do it. Because he was in a movie, I think, with Rita Moreno, I can't remember, and at the end of the film, she's running away from him, she jumps in a rowboat, and it starts to leave the shore, and it's raining hard, and that man ran out there and leapt like Mikhail Baryshnikov in a full suit and hat, right? And landed in that boat, and I was like, "Nope, never running in the rain again, because I can't do that." He's so graceful, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Uh but no, no, no. I'm glad you brought up Hitchcock because, in the nexus between our general dysmorphia with the human body. I just was watching with my wife a documentary on Vogue called In Vogue, and it was kind of a history of fashion and stuff. It was fascinating, right? But I was struck because I was thinking about our conversation coming up. I was struck by the fact that the impression that everything is sexualized also is a misprision because we occupy self chosen bubbles, right? And those bubbles tend to be all consuming. And so the version of the world that we see through social media is one that we have unconsciously we've turned into an algorithm too. And we are being prompted to choose certain things, right? But we've lost a certain kind of randomness. Like I love living in the country, even though I don't look like a country dude. And I love living in small town America, not in large urban areas. I like large urban areas because they're very convenient, but they also are filled with stress and headaches.
Yeah.
And I'd just rather do without them, right? And so I'm perfectly comfortable in a small town. But one of the things I love about being in the middle of nowhere in deep southeast Arkansas, or being in Baton Rouge or South Louisiana, right? Is that people of all races have been living in this part of the country together for hundreds of years. So they're used to each other. They're used to each other. The other thing is because of the limited number of, marketplaces for me to get the stuff that I need for my daily needs, I don't get to pick and choose my bubble. All the bubbles end up being in the aisles of Walmart, and I don't get to choose. And as you might imagine, in a town of, a county of 9,000 people, how many people do you think in this county know who I am? There's
Right.
a lot, right? I've long since stopped being embarrassed about having to ask somebody's name. I'll be like, "How do I know you?" And they'll tell me, "Oh, I took this class from you," or or your wife taught I was in her class. And so, what I love about that is that people brag in big cities that they're exposed to so many great cultures and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but that's all false. That's like social media expose. That's the stuff I choose to be exposed to.
Mm.
It's like being the gourmet that flies around the world and can sort of brag that they're so open to so many cultures, right? But like, let's unpack it a little bit. What's really happening? They're selecting to go to someplace to have a curated experience of something that they're then going to turn around and share with you. And it's going to make you feel like you're part of an experience that otherwise you wouldn't be able to avail yourself of, right?
Right.
But it's all chosen. So when I lived in Dallas, I was like, I don't have to deal with Mexican people unless I want some Mexican food or don't feel like mowing my lawn. To be cliched about it, right? Or Asian people, or right. But in a town like this, you don't have a choice. You're gonna run. That's why the Catholic Church here, St. Mark's, the most international church on the planet. Filipinos, J- we've got Japanese, we've got African American, Hispanics, white. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
And
your priest wasn't he Indian
yeah, we had the last one was
at the
Indian.
time when I was there?
Right, the one before that was Ghanan. We finally got an Arkansan as our priest. He was just installed recently. We love him, Father Brian. um, but yeah, we've had two African priests, uh, two different Indian priests. I mean, I was like, this is so awesome because we don't have a choice. We have to live together. We have to be a congregation together. And so when you don't know and you don't get to choose, well, then that's when you get to find out. You know what I mean? You don't get to play, a role of being, a very open person. Because you don't know if you're open until you know. And that means that you have to have some meaningful. And so I think that the meaningful interaction with other human beings is another one of those targets that's being destroyed. Because meaningful interactions with other human beings are groundbreaking. You know what I mean? They remind us of who we are as human beings. And it seems to me if you want to put it on the devil's doorstep, the devil would be very interested in destroying our ability. So you destroy our ability to intimately know each other through sex. You destroy marriage at the same time. You just destroy the nuclear family. You destroy people's abilities to self-identify through their own bodies. They become alienated from their own bodies to the extent that they would destroy them with surgery and
Right.
artificial hormones. It's an amazing thing. I was just joking with my wife last night. I was like, I try to warn my students about, it's a math problem. Like, look at plastic surgery. We are so afraid of being old that people are ruining their faces with plastic surgery, but it's a math problem. There are only so many med schools that offer plastic surgery as a cosmetic specialty. There are only so many experts in that field teaching the ones that are going to be the next generation of plastic surgeons. And so, no wonder women end up, after too much plastic surgery, looking like a combination of a cat and a goldfish because they're all doing the same techniques. There's only 6 techniques. And so, if you want to roll the dice on that, I'm saying, nah, don't do that. Do this. Just let it go. Right? Find out what you were supposed to look like. Not to say that I'm against all plastic surgery. Like women, the double standard for women actresses is that they're not allowed to get old. Men
Right.
can get old. We all can get ugly as we want to. But again, it goes back to that standard that we see in the male nude for the ages. Our standard for male nudity has not changed since ever. Ever. And for women, it's just been one thing after another. Um, and that's really sad to me because, that's unfair to them that we have the standard, such that and it's the market standard. Um, and in some places we're seeing it go away, and that's a good thing. But watching that show about on Vogue, with they were talking about the Oscars and then they were talking about the Met Gala and the intersection between celebrity and fashion all of a sudden happened at the Met Gala. And they were naming the year that it happened. I remember when it happened. It was when Nicole Kidman wore this to that, or you know what I mean? There was a moment. And they all agreed with that. But then the other thing that struck me was I was like listening. I was like, man, you guys are super self-absorbed. Man, you guys think you are way more important than you are. You know what I mean? Listening to them talk about their own industry and its importance
Right.
to culture, I was like, wow, y'all are living in a bubble. You are nowhere near as important as you think you are. And I call it the Taylor Swift phenomenon. She's got, hundreds of millions of followers on TikTok or whatever, Instagram, right? And
Everywhere.
there's 7 billion people on the planet. It's a math problem. She has zero influence, folks. Not a little bit, not a lot, none, right? That's why you've never seen a celebrity endorsement move the needle in a political race, ever.
Hmm.
Because when Hillary has a celebrity come to one of her fundraisers, who are the people coming to see? They coming to see Hillary? No, they're coming to see whoever that celebrity was. And so it's not going to change anybody's behavior that way. So I call it that bubble because I'll do the math on the board in my classes. And I'll say, all right, this is hundreds of millions, but that's a billion. How much is a billion? A billion is 1,000 millions. Or no, it's 10,000, right? And so then when you do the math and you take a look at the numerator and the denominator, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess she really wouldn't have that much sway, right? And so
Yeah.
all of our celebrity culture is like that. And because now we live in the age of streaming, we're all self-selecting. The markets that these celebrities, so-called celebrities, command are just shrinking. They're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I honestly think that we're due for a course correction.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And your generation and my kids' generations are the ones that are going to course correct. And we're already seeing it. You've seen the stats that are showing that millennials and younger are flocking back to church, right?
Yep.
They are, churches are growing, and it's all with the young demographic. And I'm telling you, you starve people of spiritual nourishment for long enough, it's necessary for being human. They will find a way. They might replace it for a while with something, but that something they've replaced it with is not going to work, and they'll still end up feeling hollow and hungry. And they will find it. And so that's why I'm a happy warrior, because I'm like, look, we are not going to lose this fight. I mean, I have no doubt about that. So I don't become, despairing when I see the worst parts of culture. There was a big hullabaloo about Bad Bunny playing at the Super Bowl. And I was just like, nah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Or like the Odyssey too. Like there's been so many people that say they're not going to watch it. All
What do you
this
mean?
stuff.
Nolan's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
I think they thought Elliot Page was going to be Achilles, which I don't think is true.
oh, okay.
All that, but it's like my culture. Just I look at this stuff. I mean, it's just me. I'm sure there's a lot of other people too listening, but you just see some of this stuff, and it's just so off-putting to where it's like you have to pick some kind of side,
Well,
or
let's go back to the Elliot Page comment for a minute, because one, I
yeah,
didn't even know about that.
yeah, it
And
was a big thing.
two, in ancient Greek myth, there are androgyny galore. Like, none of this is new. Tiresias got in trouble with the gods. That's the blind seer. He was punished by being turned into a woman. And then they turned him back into a man, and that's where his wisdom comes from. He's the one person on the planet that knows truly what it means to be a woman and a man.
Mm,
And so the punishment ended up being a gift as well. But then Dionysus is a male god, the twin of Hercules, looks nothing like him and is totally effeminate, but he's not gay. Do you see what I mean? But you look at him and you're like, so to cast Elliot Page in a movie called The Odyssey, I'm like, brilliant move. Because I know that there are a half a dozen different characters that she can play, especially if she plays a god, a goddess, a god, or a demigod, that he would be perfect for. You know what I
right.
mean? So I'm not going to make any assumptions about what that means at all, but I'm sure a lot of people reacted like, oh, the Odyssey's
Yeah.
gone woke. Well, you got to read ancient literature, folks. You have to read it. You can't just, pop off and decide that it was some certain way if you don't read it. And so that's why I'm surrounded by all these books, because I'm just like, because I had one student, he's like, how do you do it? And I was like, and I literally, I reached over to the bookshelf and I grabbed a book. Can't even remember which one. I was like, read it. I was like, start here. And I was like, and if you don't like it, then come back and I'll give you something else.
The
Because
source material.
yeah, I mean, you just got to go to the source material. It's eye opening. It's interesting to me that film is a great place to see it happen, where you see all these remakes, Little House on the Prairie, The Odyssey's got to be made again. But the fact that I'm excited that Christopher Nolan chose to do it is that he is an extraordinarily gifted writer and director.
Yeah, I love his stuff.
And I'm going to be totally shocked if he doesn't knock it out of the park.
I
Um,
think
you
he
know,
will.
but of course I have my ideas too. But again, speaking of film, I want to go back to Hitchcock for a second
Sure.
because I want to talk about something that I think I might have said in our Halloween special on Psycho that, Hitchcock, that movie in his body of works kind of sticks out. And I don't mean because it's better than any of his other works, but it's just so different, right? And I think when we were talking about it, I had read an article or saw an interview where somebody commented that, Hitch was aware that this new style of cinema was coming in, and he kind of made Psycho to say, okay, let me show him what I can do. And it's one of those, your audience, you gotta go watch Psycho. It's one of those movies that everybody thinks they've seen,
That's how
even
I
if,
was.
right,
I thought I
even
saw it.
if you
I
have seen it,
Yeah.
but it is not about what you think it's about in my mind, right? And so, but here's the other thing that fascinates me about Hitchcock as a filmmaker. More than any other filmmaker that I could point to, he really glommed on to the disturbing idea of the camera as a voyeur. And the idea that the movie camera shows the audience things that we literally are not supposed to see. Everything we see through the film camera, we are not supposed to see it. Right? And that's an implication. Do you see what I mean? That's a critique. That's a condemnation. That's a love-hate relationship with your audience, but it's also one where it seems to me that his camera work is begging you to consider what your relationship is to what are you doing right now?
Mm.
Like, because Psycho literally opens with a panoramic shot that focuses down to us peeking through the blinds
Right.
at a woman in a negligee reclining on a bed in the middle of the day. So he just advertised it to you. He's like, "You pervert. Are you still watching? Okay." You know what I mean? Um, but in a sense, every film does that. So we go back to that question of like when should we be showing sex and when should we? Right? You remember the heard about the movie or might have even seen it back in the day, 9.5 Weeks. Well, it Mickey Rourke and Kim Basinger. I'm not recommending it. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's a badly made film. I'm just not recommending it. It is completely saturated with nothing but sex. It's a turn the corner movie. Okay.
Don't watch that movie, audience.
Yeah, I am not recommending it. But here was the thing that turned me in that film. There's one point where the camera point of view is from Mickey Rourke's point of view during sex.
Mm.
I was like, no. Do you see what I mean? It's one thing to make me a fly on the wall. Friday the 13th did this too, where at one point you actually see a camera shot through Jason's mask. No, that is not allowed. You are not allowed to make me the killer. You're not allowed to make me the abuse. Do you see what I mean? Now, look at how badly my standards have eroded in the statement I just made. Can you see it? Like, I draw the line at you making me be Mickey Rourke, but I'm okay standing on the side watching him abuse a woman sexually.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Hitch in Psycho not only makes us the voyeur in the very first shot of the scene, then what does he do? He makes us a voyeur of a voyeur, peeping through a hole in the wall. But what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? We're peeping through a hole
through.
in the wall. And that's almost comic. It's
Brilliant.
it's an endless synopticon of peoples.
Yeah, and it's almost like that's what you could call like, this thing right here, right?
Mhm.
Is looking through the peephole constantly. And I think too, like with sexualization, with I think the interesting leap that porn made was user generated stuff,
Yeah.
which is more like Pornhub and all that. Like that completely changed the industry to where people would just send in stuff. And I mean, I wrote a pretty big article on this that I could put in the show notes about the porn industry and like why that's been a bad thing,
Mhm.
because a lot of there's been so many lawsuits, there's been so many terrible things that have happened because of that, because of people, you're not able to uh, really confirm if there's consent. A lot of the times
Exactly.
confirm
I was gonna
the
I was gonna say
age.
that earlier. That's the thing that scares me, is that there's no
Yeah,
way you can't you c there's no way from the outside looking in through your people that you know age, not really. You don't know if there's been enhancement, you don't know if there is real consent. And so there is no such thing as passive viewing.
right.
You can't watch it and pretend that you are not actively participating in something. But again, the more saturated we become with it, the more numb we become to it, and then the less its appeal becomes. And people begin, they were talking in that fashion show about the brilliance, I think, of Karl Lagerfeld, because and one of the designers or editors that was talking about his fashion sense was that, if you wanted, on fire sexuality, then you're not going to Karl Lagerfeld, because he absolutely showed you covered beauty. And I was like,
Mhm.
what great way to put it. Like, that's what our culture is missing now, right? Is not only the fashion, but the films and the art that suggest to an adult audience what is going on behind the curtain, but we don't need to see it. And we actually appreciate the fact that you're not going to show it, because it's not necessary. The only thing that's necessary is my knowledge that a union has taken place, right? Like, if marriage ends up, like, question in Othello is, did Desdemona and Othello ever actually have a chance to consummate their marriage? And if you read the play, you find that to be a question. I'm not sure that we
Mhm.
know. Do you see what I mean? Because he brought his new bride to a war in lieu of a honeymoon. And so we're not sure. And I think Shakespeare is being deliberate about that, because he wants us to question whether their marriage vows have actually been completed. Because in the old days, right, unless you consummated, the marriage wasn't valid. And so,
Ye Yeah, and okay, so that brings up a question, right? 'Cause I think, the most stunning art or the most stunning, like, movies that stick with me or books, I think are the ones that leave you with some of those questions and they drive, like, a curiosity
yeah,
where you're curious about it, and I think when you just show everything, I think Pope John Paul II, I think, had a really good quote about porn, right? Was that it doesn't show it doesn't show it's not like that porn doesn't show enough of a person, but, like, not enough of, like, who they actually are as, like,
yeah,
a person, right?
yeah,
Like, you get to see everything, but you don't really see anything, if that
right.
makes sense, and I think, in a way, right, it's like curiosity gets hijacked, I think, with sexuality, and when it's so ubiquitous, it's like you become less curious with the actual act of having actual sex, uh, and I think that happens in a lot of marriages. It happened in mine to where
Yeah,
it just affected that intimacy, to where it's like, well, why would you wanna go through that where you could just have it on demand at any time
right.
when you want and when you need it, and something that, you don't have to deal with emotions, you don't have to deal with any of that stuff. It's kind of a risky thing. Like you're opening yourself up. It's like the most vulnerable position that you can be and the other person can be. There's a lot of trust involved with it, right?
Well, right, absolutely. But look, without actually entering into um relationships where those things, you have to put those things at risk. um how fully human can you say you are, or how real is the relationship? If you can simply, I mean, maybe that's half the battle for people who are addicted to it, is is I get to avoid all those entanglements, but I also don't have to risk anything. And so I get to, but how long does living in that, that pretend world work? From your own experience, it doesn't work. It's temporary, right? And sex by its nature is temporary.
Right.
So it goes back to what C.S. Lewis said in his book, The Four Loves. The danger of Eros is that Eros will make every single promise to you that Agape or charity or the God of love will make. But Eros can't pay off on any of them. But he sure does market well and entice you with the idea that he can give you the same payoffs. But Eros by its nature is temporary. So it means that the sexual union is a temporary experience that belongs within the fabric of a larger context. Which again, I'm going to go back. I'm going to defend it. I'm going to say marriage. It's like my mom told me when I was a kid. She's like, you don't misunderstand what the church means about sex and marriage. The church says any sex outside of marriage is a sin. Masturbation,
Right.
homosexual sex, non-married heterosexual sex. They're all sins because sex is sacred and sex is reserved. I love that word. The gods have reserved it. That's how special and how good it is. So again, it never surprises me to see in that large, the 1,000-yard view, what is this all about? Oh, I see. It's about Satan is a ruiner. He's an envier and a ruiner. He can't make anything and he can't stop God's providence from coming about. So what is he busy himself doing? And what did we say in the vampire one? The vampire is the one that seduces you into participating in choosing your own destruction. That's the vampire. And that's all Satan can do. If God will do no thing that he cannot delegate to one of his creatures, Satan can't do anything that he can't get somebody else to do for him. How weak is that? He's got to get you to do it. Do you see what I mean? And
Convince
so
you.
right. And so my favorite quote is Thomas
And
More.
keep going. I'm going to let my dog out really quick, but keep going. I'll be right back. Keep going.
Well, all I'm going to say is, my favorite quote from St. Thomas More is, don't forget that Satan, that proud spirit, cannot stand to be scorned, meaning he can't stand to be laughed at. So when we are enticed, when we are seduced, take a breath and see it for what it is and move on, is my advice. It works for me most of the time. And don't forget that we are actually pretty ridiculous creatures, which should give us a sense of perspective. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying this. I see there are some people that are tuned in.
Yeah, I'm back. He was scratching at the door.
Come in?
What's that?
To come in or go out?
To go out.
Ah, gotcha.
But he's one of those 17-year-old dogs, he's got.
Yeah, I got one too.
But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think we've talked about a lot. I think there's some questions that I have that are coming up too that I just can't get this out of my mind. But I think it's almost like we're moving forward in this world, right? The technological world, I guess. And when you're talking about advancements, right, or evolution, in my mind, it seems like we're being pushed, or it like naturally is happening potentially, but by really big industries that have this technology, right, or that are that have the algorithmic control to feed us certain information, to where, to me, I think as technology gets more advanced, and seems like we're as humans almost like morphing into technological beings. Like it's like the phone might be an antiquated thing maybe in 10 or 15 years, where maybe it's a chip that we have or something that's plugged into our brain potentially. Like that could be. It seems so far-fetched right now.
No,
But
I don't think it
it's
is.
like, where are we going,
Well, I think it, last time we were together on one of your podcasts, I talked about the Tamagotchi, And the insight I had that these Japanese toy makers were training us to obey our machines. My latest saying on X now is, you're not using AI. AI is using you.
Like we're more the product.
We are the product.
Yeah.
What the heck did Mark Zuckerberg ever do but use me as a product? Which is another reason why I have the persona I do on X. Because I'm going to determine what that product is, in a sense. I'm not making any money off of it. I don't care about that necessarily. But the other half of it is, okay, so we've been trained to allow our machines to run us. Right now, what did Ben Franklin say? He said, necessity is the mother of invention. Now, invention is the mother of necessity for us. Right?
Mm.
We literally do obey our phones. We live in a world where when our phone says, I just got a message from my phone today, say, hey, you got to give me some money by the 17th. Okay. You know what I mean? Okay. And
Right.
they're so good at it. In the last 2 weeks, I've had notices like I've poked my head in the door. I was like, am I paying for Paramount Plus? And my wife is like, no, because I got a notice that it denied my payment. I was like, I don't pay for it. You know what I mean? So how did that happen? It's trying to get money out of my PayPal wallet and it's not there. And it's telling me, hey, you need to fix this. No, I don't. She's like, if you get any notices like that, just cancel them because everything's coming through through my accounts. So that's part of it, is that we're being trained to run errands, for the Matrix, so that it can achieve its goals, right? And in the meantime,
is the goal attention?
well, I think that's the bait, right?
That's the bait.
That's
Yeah,
the bait.
that's right.
The bait is because you said earlier, kids want to belong, they want an identity. Saying I want an identity is the same as saying I want acceptance by a group that values the things that I stand for, right? And I think the other thing that, since masculinity has been under attack, it's so weird. Porn's everywhere. Masculinity's under attack.
And I think porn attacks masculinity. I don't think that porn is. I really don't think like porn's really that masculine of a thing. Honestly, that's my.
Well,
point.
yeah. I mean, it shows men, at their most naked and at their most intimate and it's not.
What I guess it my thing is that it trains men to get aroused and to orgasm off another man having sex with a woman.
Right. And so it's an attack against male sexuality,
Right.
traditional male sexuality, and a degrading of females. Have you noticed? Well, no, you haven't noticed, but I'll tell you something that you would notice. In the last 6 or 7 years, as a result of our woke culture, every single sex scene that I have seen on mainstream streaming, woman is on top. Because you can't show a man on top because that implies violence.
Mm.
And so in order to clearly graphically depict that the woman is choosing to participate in this thing, the woman's on top.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's a thing. Makes total sense to me given the culture, right? But we've gotten ourselves into kind of a pickle because the transgender movement too, ultimately what gets canceled with transgenderism is male homosexuality. Some people might applaud that, but it also erases the female. Along with abortion, the female body its function is just as a what, right? And at the same time, the feminist movement says that women have been denied the positions, social positions and political positions and cultural positions by the patriarchy. And so what they have to do is they have to become the things that they hate. Males are toxic, but women have to become them.
Yeah, I find that really interesting.
It's not interesting. It's absurd. And what I love about absurdity is that after a while, absurdity can't be ignored. And so you're starting to see the cracks, right? That's why I love comics, because real comics they're the first defenders of free speech, and they're the first exposers of absurdity.
Right.
And so you're starting to see it. And it's like, all right, see, there's hope, folks. Because, here's the thing. We white male heterosexuals have gotten long used to the idea that the only kind of person that you can make fun of on TV is us, right? Married, semi-conservative, heterosexual, white guys. And what do they all look like?
They all look like Homer Simpson.
Right. They all look like Doug Heffernan, right? That's the safe one. But the thing I try to remind people of is, hey, if you belong to a group that you self-identify as a tribe that you self-identify as belonging to, and I'm not allowed to make fun of you, then you haven't made it yet. Like when I can make fun of you, then you made it. Give yourself a pat on the back. Yay, you're mainstreamed. So notice what all of this wokeism does is it tribalizes us and it marginalizes everybody. But see, this is also what the communists always do. They say, we want you to identify with a group. Then they invent or discover an ancient sin of the group, and then they make you be the sacrificial lamb to expiate the group for that sin. And that's the way wokeism works. That's the way tribalism works, the new tribalism of social media. It's completely like that. People are absolutely dedicated to becoming, famous, rich, and, taking shortcuts. I feel bad for them. Like I do this stuff that we're doing right now. I'm not monetized. I'm not looking to make a dollar off of it. It's not why I do it. At the same time, I'm an academic, and I told my dean, I said, this business of academics not doing social media is BS, because the only way we can engage the culture outside of our classroom is this way. So we better get really good at it. So, I'm closing in on about 7,000 followers on X, and I didn't realize this put me in like the top 5%, which is ridiculous. But that's X number of times more than the students that come to my university. And what I like about the followers that you have on X is they're very niche oriented. You know what I mean? So they do actually have things in common with each other. So I'm like, all right, I can feel satisfied. I'm not changing the world, but these people are tuning in for some reason, not counting the robots and the fakes. You know what I mean? So I know it says 7,000, but for real, I have probably a couple of hundred people that are regular people that engage, and, I have conversations with and stuff. But my point is, in order for my goal to be met, which is to actually have a positive influence on the overall culture in whatever way I can, then it's achieving my goal, and I'm fine with it. But what happens to you when you get seduced by the bug that says that, hey, if I could just come up with that one thing and get those million right, then that's going to translate into. But notice how temporary all of it is.
Yeah, it's all temporary. Right?
It's all. I mean, I don't mean human life is temporary. I mean, like, fame is temporary. It's a bad of the eye, and the influence. Like I mentioned, Twiggy. I bet you there are people in your audience that would probably have to look that up. Who's Twiggy, and what was that? What was that cultural moment? Right. Well, because that kind of cultural knowledge, either you had to have been there, or you have to get into a niche and study it. Everything's getting siloed. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, just to hit on that, where I did an episode called, actually, this is kind of funny now I'm looking at it. It'll be the 8th time you're on my podcast. It was that OnlyFans model that we talked about in that one podcast, and how I think where I was going with it was another thing that's online too is this almost like a promotion of, hey, like you can pay for college, or like you don't even really need a job. Like you can just be like an OnlyFans model. Basically how that's being offered, I think, as like a way to make money, as a way to basically you don't need a conventional job. All you need to do is, build a fan base and show yourself to the camera. I think you were talking about the word temporary, and it is a temporary thing. But I think the interesting thing about the internet, right, is like once you put that on there, like that stuff will like live forever.
Well, yes, yeah, but in the age of AI, I was thinking about this too in preparation for our conversation. In about 15 minutes, none of it's going to matter because nobody's going to be able to verify what's real and what's not real anymore. And so it literally is going to be a nothing.
Right.
People are going to they're like, well, what about this thing I saw you, Dr. Borse, in there saying? I'm just like, I had an incident a few years ago. Got called to the principal's office because I had a conversation with somebody on Facebook, and they got mad at me, and they wanted to get me in trouble. They wanted to get me fired, and so they reported it to my bosses, and I got called down to make an accounting of myself. But on my way to campus that day, I got a message from somebody that said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that guy that is going after you, he deleted all of his part of the conversation before he sent it to your boss."
Whoa.
So when I got in there, they're pushing this paper toward me, say, "We just want to verify." And I said, "I'm not even looking at that." And they said, "Are you denying that you had it?" And I said, "No, I'm not denying anything." I said, "But I'm not going to verify it because I know it's been altered. So what you looked at is not what happened."
Right.
And then they said, "Are you saying that he changed what you said?" And I said, "I don't know. You don't know either. And if you want to spend the money for the IT department to try to figure ISP, all that stuff, go ahead." I said, "But no, I'm not verifying any of this because I don't have any trust that what you saw is reflective of the conversation that actually happened, because that's gone. It's been wiped. It's been wiped. I mean, it could be recovered. I'm sure you're right, right?
Yeah.
By an expert." And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, my generation would have been like, "Oh my gosh, I would never participate in stuff like that because I'd be afraid that it would come back to haunt me because somebody would always be able to find it." And at this point, all of this stuff is so ubiquitous that, like, my attitude towards social media postings is I don't believe anything until I can reasonably go through, especially if it's something that I care about, to figure out if it's real or not. And now I'm getting very good. I used to say I'm not a very intuitive person, but I'm getting very good at being able to tell almost immediately what's fake.
Yeah.
And like recently, a whole bunch of stuff came out, and I don't want to get in the weeds on politics, but a whole bunch of stuff came out about the US Iranian war. And what I noticed about it was that it was almost like talking points had been sent out because everybody was saying the same thing at about within the same window. And I'm like, no, you know what I mean? Like, no, all of these people cannot have formed this opinion and be parroting the same thing at the same time from both ends of the political spectrum, because it was the extreme left and the extreme right saying exactly the same thing
Yeah.
and being outraged by the same thing. And I'm like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Do you think that, maybe taking it back to the topic with that, do you think that I think you mentioned the term like the counter correction.
Yeah,
Do you think that's going to happen with sexuality, to where, especially the AI, like where, let's just say TV shows or movies, they start, hey, it's like the first like AI characters like having a love scene together.
yeah, yeah.
Like, when you think about it that way, do you think that might snap people back into thinking like, man, like we've really gone over the deep end with this?
I do, because I think that the attack against standards and the lower and the transgression of standards, right? So you lower one standard and then the standard comes down here, right? And it's just like this with addicts for anything. And then you're hit for your porn hit for that dopamine rush with that new lower standard after a while doesn't work anymore. So everything ends up being like the island of lost boys in Peter Pan. It's absolutely temporary. And the only way to keep it going is to make it worse, right? Until you've actually literally gotten to the deepest circle of hell. And then there is no more down to go.
Yeah, because I think about that, right? Because like I used to just be so like all the time like wanting to watch show or whatever. Like even like Game of Thrones, right? Like
Yeah,
Game of Thrones, it's funny. I'm sure Game of Thrones fans will relate, but I mean, what they did the last season was just such a bad taste in my mouth,
yeah,
just with the writing and just how they concluded things, because it was leading up, like, you had all these theories about what was gonna happen. I remember, I
yeah,
think we had, like, almost, with some close friends, like, we almost had, like, a betting board on, like, okay, who's gonna be the king of Westeros, or, like,
yeah,
who's gonna kill, like, the Night King, and, all this stuff, right? And you're all excited, and then it's, like, almost like all of it just seemed so, like, not earned. So then for me, and this applies to a lot of things, but, like, I just if I'm gonna, like, watch a show, on, like I'm gonna like turn on like King of the Hill. I'm gonna turn on like an older TV show that I know is good and interesting, or I'm gonna look back. Like I started to get kind of into like there's like a primetime era was like in the '90s, like right before 2000, really, where there was just some like I would say animated, like a lot of them from Japan.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot too, but you can almost see too with I think now like anime gets such a bad rap because it's been so sexualized.
Yeah.
So where like if I say like I watch anime, like your
Then
first thought's gonna be like, oh, like you're just watching that. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, like there's some really good stuff like Afro Samurai is like one of my favorites with Samuel L. Jackson. Like
Yeah,
great.
and I have really, really bright students. I've never been a fan of anime, but I'm not against it.
Yeah.
Just not it's not my generation. And, I mean, although I gotta say, I was a huge fan of, Speed Racer when I was a kid. So, like, the animation style, I'm very familiar with. Um, and you froze again, but I'll keep going. Um, but I think Japanese culture, I'm glad you brought up Japanese culture because Japanese culture is a lot of people that live in a very, very small geographic area. And so the way that their culture gets, distorted happens a lot more quickly than it does in other parts of the world, especially the United States. And that's what I mean by saying that a lot of these things give us the impression that the world is a certain type of way when it's not really the world that is that way. Because I live in a part of the country where people still do real things every day. They farm, they hunt, they fish, they know how to dress an animal, they know how to cure meat. They know, you know what I mean? And so those people definitely are not part of the world that you and I are talking about. And I'm not saying that they're not consumers of porn or are not affected by the sexualization of the culture through media. But again, that that media lens is a distortion. And it's always going to present us with a certain kind of extreme from a norm that nowadays in television is generally ignored or tweaked a little bit to give the semblance of normality with the introduction of new elements like Modern Family, which I find to be a perfectly serviceable comedy that offers us a version of American culture, which exists in a place like Los Angeles. It's very it's very easy for me to believe that, right? But I see it. I see images of that culture in Arkansas too. People would be surprised. Where young people are embracing alternative, so-called, used to be called alternative lifestyles, and they get along fine. Um, they're pretty accepted. So I don't know. I think there's a flip side to both to the coin. But I honestly believe that you remember that one time we were together and I showed you that sort of corkscrew. And
Yeah.
remember? So like Game of Thrones is up here in the corkscrew of the denigration of standards, right? And its core audience is the one that hasn't dipped this far down, right? But the goal is to get them to go down there or find themselves down there, right? But like I said, you can't fool reality. What do most of us do when we get to a point with a series where we're kind of calling, you know, BS on the absurdity, right? Or the sellout or the why did they do that? Like with the Lord of the Rings thing, I was very hopeful, that all this money is being spent. It's Tolkien's world. I'm a huge fan. And I immediately was like, no. You know what I mean? Like, no. And that's
Right.
because I know Tolkien.
Yeah,
And
that was a hard one to watch.
yeah, I was like, that's not Galadriel. She was never like that. She never needed to be like that. What, and it's kind of what's his name? Not Sam Jackson, but Peter Jackson's fault because he kind of did that to her in the Hobbit series. Had to make her a badass warrior princess.
And
Like, no.
I think the whole Hobbit series, right? I mean, that was a lot of studios like the damage, from my understanding.
You said
a lot of
Office?
battles with Peter Jackson studio.
Oh, yeah. So but there's still a lot of good television out there, and And streaming has reinvigorated the long form storytelling. And so things like, Nick Pizzolatto's True Detective is one example, just the first 3 seasons. And then uh, what's my favorite show about the U.S. Marshal Givens? Anyway, that one was quite good. Sons of Anarchy was really good until the very end. And then Breaking Bad was, we've got a lot of examples of really, really good storytelling that aren't participating in any of it. There's no need, right? To participate in any of that. And if they do mention that, it's always mentioned like in season 2 of True Detective, Nick has the plot take us to a rather eyes wide shut kind of thing going on at this private party. But again, it's all because of the negative. And so it's integral to the plot. And it's shown for what it is, which is a perversion, interestingly, by criminal elites that crave the old days when all of that stuff could happen behind closed doors. Because what they enjoyed about it was putting on the clothing of respectability during the day, knowing that they were absolutely denigrating the culture that was enriching them at night. And I think there is a crave for that for it to go back underground, because the underground now is just, it doesn't have a lid on it. So it's a double-edged sword for sure, but the devil can't make anything. And so he's going to run out of things to use. Does that make sense? He lives in a finite universe of things that he can use to distort. And we will see the day when he's got no arrows left in his quiver. And at that point, everybody will just laugh. Say, really? That's what you were after? That's what you were doing the whole time? So I don't know. But I hate to do it, but I think I'm going to have to get going. I hope we filled this well.
No, I think we covered a lot of great topics. Thanks for everyone being on and listening. Dr. Borst is one of those guys where, first of all, great human being, straight meeting you and your wife. It was awesome to be able to stay with you for a couple of days. And I mean, I'll never forget when we recorded that, before we recorded that Hitchcock episode, which is episode 52, we watched it outside my RV. I have an outdoor TV. We had the speaker. I think we had some bourbon. I was in the hammock. You were in my little camping rocking chair. We had my dogs outside, and we were in the woods. And every once in a while, you'd hear something. You're like, "Was that like a wild hog or something?" Like I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, that was such a cool experience to do that. Talking about just, I think ultimately, maybe where I land just with the topic and what I'm thinking about is, ultimately, I think it's about, what standards do we have in our life that we're going to hold sacred. And I think a standard is definitely human connection. And I think just human connection, connecting with people in real life, doing real life things that have value to them, that you're interested in, that you're curious in. And I think just be aware at how these inputs, while you're on social media, while you're on TV, while you're on movies. I think you said something I wanted to hit on really quickly before we hop off, but
hey, before I do, I just noticed somebody named Sarah Perkins just joined us, and I think that might be my sister. So Sarah Perkins, if you're my sister, I love you, and thank you for joining us in late. This is going to be put up probably in about a week. So whatever you missed, you'll be able to go back and listen to.
That's cool. Hey, Sarah.
And Sarah, I didn't say any curse words. I promise you. She called me on that one time, and I learned.
That is Sarah.
It is my sister. She just said,
"Hey, that's cool. I love that." Well, thinking about that, right? I mean, that's connection right there.
For the audience, if you want to know about my sister Sarah, just watch any Brooke Shields movie, because she's our Brooke Shields sister. That's who she looks like. I just watched a Brooke Shields movie the other week, which was absurd and so entertaining. I'm like, man, she reminds me of my sister so much. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Anyway,
that's good. You guys got some good genes in the family.
Yeah, we do.
But I guess like that one thing you said really stood out to me was like, what are you doing? Right. And that's a question to ask, right? Like when I'm watching the chocolate commercial and it's making me feel a certain way because there's some seductive woman talking. It's like, or you're watching a movie, right? And there's a scene coming up with a really attractive woman and, she's starting to take her clothes off. I think that's a question to ask yourself is like, what are you actually doing, like watching this? Like, how is this guiding your next choices in life?
Well,
Is it bringing you closer to God? Is it bringing you closer to your spouse? Or is it pulling you away? And I think that's part of why I want to do the podcast today is just to talk about that
yeah.
aspect.
And we talked about how temporary it is, and you complimented me earlier saying, you're still a good looking guy. Okay, fine. But what I tell my students is, look, that's good looking. That's me with my eldest daughter, Elizabeth, when I was like 28 years old, right? But you get to be this a heck of a lot longer than you get to be this.
Mm.
So so standards, right? Human connections, but also keeping your promises, making the right promises and then keeping your promises ends up, affording you the opportunity to actually end where you meant to end. Right. And so I think that has to be the goal. Immanuel Kant says, if you had the opportunity to start your whole life over right now, you know what I mean? Knowing everything that you know, would you do it? And then he says something devastating. He says, because if your answer is yes, you did it wrong.
Mm.
And I'm like, what an impossible standard. You know what I mean? What an impossible standard. It means you're not allowed to make any mistakes. But so I don't believe that necessarily. But when people ask me, I'd say, no, I wouldn't go back and do it over again. I cherish even the mistakes I made ended up yielding fruit. And the goal always, since you're going to be old for a long time, man, learn how to do it well. Because you don't want to be old and miserable. You know what I mean? Like that can't be the goal. Um, and so I think that when you're your age, you have to think in terms of the long game. Where do I want to end up? And what has to be true, as Dave Ramsey would say, what has to be true for that to be what happens with me? And you're going to have to suffer in between to get to where you want to go. But you saw, I mentioned it again. You saw how I live. I saw how you live. I wouldn't change. I don't think I made a mistake. I never
No.
thought I'd end up in Arkansas, but like I'm perfectly happy. And I love teaching, and this is great. And my situation is great. Um, and so yeah, I'd encourage your viewers to think about the temporariness of the pleasures that they're getting out of those things, or the temporariness of we did the lonely fans thing. You could offer me $1 million right now, Matt, to tell you what that girl's name is, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's how temporary that was. It was outrageous and it was gone in 15 minutes.
Right.
Um, because it was just a denigration of another standard, but all it was, there was nothing original about it. It was just the multiplication of the denigration of the same standard. Right. And as if math, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I can, I don't know, St. Augustine said that he and his friends used to have sort of verbal contests to see who could be more despicable than their other friends. And they would even lie about the despicable things they did just to win. You know what I mean? Like that's how much they wanted to be sort of the standard for their little evil. But if you stand back from that and look at it, it's on its face, it's absurd. Really?
Mm-mm.
You crave belonging so much that you're willing, right, to lie about how bad you are just to make an impression on these type of people. And I think celebrity culture is just like that. I look at it and I'm just like,
Right.
wow.
Yeah. Only they don't look like they're enjoying life.
Sometimes, and then you get those rare ones that seem like I was surprised in this show that I watched yesterday with Gwyneth Paltrow. My impression of her is not very good, but on the other hand, she's quite smart. You know what I mean? She had some really intelligent things to say and very kind things to say. And I was like, okay, I'm glad I got to see this side of her because my impression of her through Goop, her product line is not a favorable. But by the same token, I'm reminded every day that these bubbles that it's like Eros masquerading as God the Father, right?
Mm,
The God of erotic love masquerading as the God of charity. They look like the promises that they can make can all be delivered on, and they can't. But man, they look good. They really look good, and they look desirable. But then you take a look at the standards for beauty in Hollywood and stuff, and you notice that women, their careers are half as long as men, even the most talented ones,
right.
because they're not allowed to get old. And that's really sad that we would, because I mentioned Moonstruck earlier. Moonstruck is a movie that is filled with real old people, and they're like real people. And I'm like, yeah, we just don't see that often enough. Old Country for
Mm.
Old Men had that in it too, and I loved it for it.
Yeah, it's a great
Um,
movie.
yeah, it's a great movie. So, but yeah, I would land on the thing that it really is about standards, personal standards and public ones, and it's about making actually educating yourself. And I hate using that term. Be well read and go to the original sources so that you don't have to rely on anybody else like me to tell you what Shakespeare means. You read it, you'll get it. But and then live by standards, because at the end of the day, those are the ones that let you sleep soundly and wake up feeling like a man.
Mm,
Like you know what I mean? I don't need accolades from anybody else to tell me, because I know who I am.
mm,
Great line from Moonstruck. There's a moment when a guy's trying to get a lady to go up to her apartment, and the implication is maybe we could, have a little bit of a thing. And she says, I can't. Nobody's at my house. And he says, oh, you know, and she says, no, I can't, because I know who I am. And I was like,
mm,
bam. You know what I mean?
mm.
She's a married woman. I know who I am. Of course, no, we're not going upstairs. And it's just a great moment. But that line, she says it with such conviction and no defensiveness at all. And I think that's what kind of drives people crazy about me on X, is because I'm that guy. I don't apologize for, you know what I mean? I joke about it. I don't apologize for it. Some people take it the wrong way. That's okay. Cause that's cooked in. Um, but like last week I had a thing with a guy that I thought I knew pretty well, and I got upset about it, and we had a back and forth, and he said something, that was insulting to me. Like, you need to go take a nap, or whatever. And then I woke up the next day, and you know what I did? I messaged him and I was like, hey, I did overreact to that. Please forgive me. I took a nap. And he's like, wait. And he came back to me. He messaged me back. He's like, did something happen? And I'm like, all right, we're good. You know what I mean? But, um, but yeah, own your mistakes too. You know what I mean? And for those of you who know me a little bit, I teach in prison, and I always talk to my guys about this, that, you know, let's get rid of the passive language about crime and everything else. Like, you know what I mean? Don't say, I'm sorry that it happened. If you
Right,
did it, say, please forgive me for what I have done. Like, things don't happen, you do them.
right.
And I hope we can even make our language uses reflective of a more, for lack of a better term, a more manly ownership of our own choices. Um, yeah, yeah. So go and do well, brother knights.
Amen to that. Do you want to, maybe we could end in prayer and then we could hop off?
Yeah, it's your turn though. Do you mind?
No, I don't.
All right.
So I
I'm
think
going
I'll
to make the
do,
sign of the cross.
yeah, that's fine. We'll see the Lord's Prayer and then I'll say a little bit. So, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom
Thy
come,
kingdom come, thy will be
thy will
done
be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us
Give us
this day
this
our
day our
daily
daily
bread, and forgive us our
forgive us our
trespasses,
trespasses,
as
as
we
we
forgive
forgive those who
who
trespass against us.
trespass against us. And lead us not
Lead us
into
not into temptation,
temptation, but
deliver us from
deliver
evil.
us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
And Lord, just thank you for Dr. Borse and his light and his knowledge and the conversation that we had today. Thank you all for all the people listening, that this might get them thinking about things a little bit differently. And Lord, just thank you for the breath that we take, the life that we have, the beautiful world that you've created for us, and let us go forward into this world and be lights for others. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right. And I wish the best to all of your viewers. I can't wait to see this. Because this is the first time we've done the Substack thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, folks, I have a Substack. It's called GREGORBO. That's a capital G, followed by, or all one word, GAM, capital GAM. A GAM in Moby Dick is when ships are passing each other and they will ride up like in the middle of a 4-month voyage, and they'll join and they'll tether themselves together and like banquet for 3 days.
Oh, that's great.
So my Substack is called Gregorbo GAM, and soon enough I'm going to start offering chapter by chapter my novel called The Incorruptibles. Maybe we can talk about that when I get that up. And if people are interested, they can start reading my novel
Cool.
for free at first. So
Yeah. And then it's at Gregory Borse at X, if you're on X.
yeah.
And we'll put all that in the show notes. And yeah, just thanks again. And we actually also got my Personal Freedom podcast that I started up. We did a recording of that a couple weeks ago. So that should be coming out about in a month or so. Will be more about Dr. Borst and his life, getting to know him a little bit more. And that was a great conversation, and about his personal freedom in his life. So to learn more about him, check out the Personal Freedom podcast. That should be coming out in a few weeks. And we will catch you all later. So thanks for being on the Personal Freedom
God
podcast.
bless. Thanks for having me again, Matt.
God bless everyone. And everybody, break free, stay free, be free, and keep fighting the good fight. Talk to you all later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Chain, same old loop, same old shame. Pocket full of promises that never paid my rent. I lost too many days chasing smoke and empty haze. Now I want a life that fits, a life I won't resent. I can feel it in my bones. I don't need that old control. One step and another step. Watch me take it back home. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. I want a life I don't escape. I want a home inside my name. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. Be free. Morning light on the kitchen floor. I don't run from it anymore. I got plans that reach past pain and work that makes me proud. Little wins in the daily grind, clear eyes and a steadier mind. I don't need to numb it out. I wanna stand up loud. I can feel it in my bones. I don't need that old control. One step then another step. Watch me take it back home. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. I want a life I don't escape. I want a home inside my name. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. No more locked doors in my head. No more ghosts in my bed. I choose truth over the rush. I choose living over dread. Keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, Be free, keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free.